Look, I've got some thoughts on what I've learned, but particularly in the time under Quorn, where there's hopefully this similarity to what some of you are doing is I wasn't in a comfy office in a big corporate company. I was in a business that lived or died by how well I ran it. And as I think I was just saying at the start of this, when we were having a wonderful dinner in a place like this, after having sold the business, one of the original bankers that have been with us all the way through, and it's great, Kev, that you've done this. He said, most of the CEOs don't make it from the start to the finish. I was going, you never said that, you know, when we're signing the deal at the start. So it is a very different world. You don't normally go to someone like Kellogg's and expect to be fired within 18 months if it doesn't quite go to plan. So hopefully there's some similarities. So I structured around 4 or 5 thoughts. The first, which I suspect is true for all of you, but it's important, is really loving what you're doing and being really passionate about it and believing in it. And some of that is sounds obvious, but there's quite a few reasons why I think it's disproportionately important. I think it was something that even when I work in corporate businesses, I was kind of lucky to just be natural, innate in me and what I did. And as a little story, when I went to Quorn, after about 3 months, I just thought this thing was amazing. It was really badly run by Premier, but I thought this thing's absolutely amazing. There was no management buyout potential at this moment in time. But I was really excited. So I went to see my older sister, Mary, and I said, I'm doing this thing at Quorn. It's just fantastic, whatever. And she said, Kevin, every single job you've had, within 3 months, you always come and tell me how absolutely amazingly exciting this new thing is, and you've sold some very dull things in your life. So I think I realised that the innate kind of passion and love of what I'm doing was there. But it's important because, as I'm sure most of you have experienced or are experiencing, if you're doing what you're doing, it will dominate your life. So if you're not enjoying it, it's going to be tough, because it's probably not an 18-month journey that you're on. Secondly, the money is uncertain. You may succeed or you may fail. So if you're just doing it with no other purpose to make money, there's probably other ways to go make a decent living. And I never did it for the money. It was great to be successful and get it, but I did it for the kind of achievement and drive. And that was really tested in me, because actually, whilst we did really well, there was a point where it went horribly wrong about 2 years in. And it wasn't anything I'd done. I might touch upon it later on. But we fell out with Tesco, and that's the biggest customer in the UK. That's kind of a big thing to fall out with. And it was necessary to fall out with, but it just wrecked the year. And you're not stupid enough to kind of go, if this doesn't come back quick enough, it may be someone else that's sorting this out. So I was really tested to kind of, how did I feel about that? And I didn't give a shit about the financial implication. What really annoyed me was I knew I could turn this business around, and it could get that opportunity could get taken away from me, and I might look as though I couldn't do it. And I think that's you've got to really think, is that what's really driving you? Because I think you've got more chance of success if you really care about what you're doing and making it work, than just trying to add up what it will look like if somebody buys it and so on. I think there's 2 other reasons why that's important, which is in smaller businesses, and you're generally on a kind of smaller end than even what I was doing at Quorn. I think those sort of business the drive and energy comes disproportionately out of the leader. If you're not kind of looking like this is the most exciting thing in the world, you're not going to get the best out of your people. That's not true. When I was in Kellogg's, the department I ran had 100 people in it, never mind the business unit that I was in. So leadership's important, but it's a very different style of leadership. I think your drive and passion and belief are really critical to the business. And again, if you go back to, it's probably as good a time as any to cover it, but the chances that you just have a straight line of success, the bed business sounds like it might be just one of those rare examples where it goes out there. The journey is, even the successful journeys like ours are really bumpy. And when the bumps are the most important bit, the down bits are the bumps, because if you look like you're now panicking or worried or whatever, the rest of the organisation going, he's worried, we should be really worried. And then all you do is just kind of performance goes down the plan. We certainly had several times where, you know, I think there was a point, not probably the kind of year when we just started to come out of the challenge from the Tesco situation, where I don't think anybody on my exec team really believed we were going to succeed. They just couldn't, you know, rationally say, "Oh, we get it." And you just kind of, frankly, till it's impossible to win, you just got to believe you're going to win, because that's your, I think, in these kind of founder type businesses, it's the role you're going to play. And the last bit is on why that passion and belief is so important is investors, which is if you're going to need investment and you're going to need more investment, or maybe even want to kind of sell it and move on, investors don't buy P&Ls. They buy stories, passion, and people. The P&L's got to make sense, but it's not the driving factor, you know. And you know, over the 5-year journey, you know, a lot of my job actually was convincing investors, future potential buyers, on how exciting the business was, and I kind of did that by telling stories and just showing how passionate I was about it. And we're all passionate in there, and you know. That doesn't mean you know, I can't be passionate. I'm not an expert. I'm a kind of very kind of introverted, kind of laid-back person. But when people talk to me about Quorn, it's not long before they realise that it's just one of the most exciting things in my life, by the way I talk about it. So you can do it in your own way. You don't have to be somebody who thinks that they're a natural kind of performer from that point of view. And a great example of that, how important that was, or bring it to life, was I was in the US with Hulan Loki, one of the big banks, and they had a kind of food conference for businesses that mainly ultimately would kind of get sold. They weren't always for sale. And I had to do this presentation, and there's two things to remember about it, because everyone else was presenting was American, so you can imagine what that was like. They were super excited about the coffee, it was like, and so actually we did a rehearsal, and I said, it's really good. They said, have a couple of espressos before you go on. You kind of, and I wasn't first on, and this lady presented, funny enough, on a coffee business that sounded to me like just another coffee business, but God, she was so excited about this thing. So I did this presentation, and it went down fine. And there's this guy came up to me. He'd been working in Quorn in the US for about 10 years. He said, "Kev, I'm so excited. I want to work for that company. What is it?" It's our company. And he just, the way I described it is almost kind of going, you know, it almost didn't even sound like what I worked for. It was so. I think you can't underestimate even with investors the power of that. And the belief thing kind of ties into that. The second thing, and I think this would be really important, even more important the smaller the business gets, is sort of the balance of I call it business plan versus people. I think you need a decent business plan, but you don't succeed by having the world's greatest business plan or strategy. You'll probably succeed by having the best people in the right jobs. And that gets massively underestimated. And I think particularly identifying a combination of where's the value in the business that you've got, in other words, what's going to make the biggest difference, and or where are the biggest challenges, and getting the right people in the right jobs for that. There's no question. You know, I think I'm pretty smart on strategy, but all the best decisions I made were about people, and the worst decisions I made about people. So I think our international business suffered because I didn't have good enough person running it, and I kind of made that mistake twice. One of them I had to fire a friend that I brought into the business, which was pretty horrible, but he was failing miserably in the job, and we were running out of time. But that probably cost, you know, 50, 100 million of enterprise value in a business that we sold for 550 million. It was a pretty material difference, I think, versus had I got a top-class person into that job. I'd underestimated the difficulty in it. And to get the best people, sometimes, unfortunately, you've got to get rid of somebody that's in your organisation, unless you literally started from scratch. And I remember doing something similar to this, and a very successful guy in the energy industry, and he came up to me, and I actually thought this guy was so confidently cool. And he said, Kevin, he said, I really get that, he said, but you know, I've had these people working for years. I just don't think I don't think I can fire people like you're describing. I said, if you think, I said, I'd be physically ill before, you know, firing somebody, because it's usually somebody who's doing their best. It's not somebody that's kind of, it's easy to fire someone who's, you know, gross misconduct or lazy or whatever. But you usually find someone who's just not good enough. I said, it's horrible, but unfortunately, it's kind of the job. But I said, if you think I'm a hire and fire guy, it's kind of probably the opposite. But you learn in this game, in corporate life, you can sometimes carry someone. There's enough people you work around someone. You're not going to have businesses where you can afford to work around someone that's, you know, central to the valuation. So, but it doesn't mean you have to be a nasty person, but sometimes it's kind of the only way the business and you'll succeed. But the other side of it, so positive, is where I've got the, you know, the right person, and I kind of changed our marketing head about halfway through, and that probably added even more than the 50 to 100 million they lost on the other side, and he's still with us, and you know, made a massive difference to the success of the business. Couple of last thoughts before you can kind of maybe ask me anything that's on your minds, which is the one thing certainly I would consider and did was I had a kind of personal coach, and the reason why that I think is really worth considering is not for necessarily some of the reasons that they used in corporate life of developing your leadership, but there's two things really. Getting the team dynamics right is really important, and how you manage that team. And when you're in smaller businesses, you haven't got support structures of a HR department or other facilities that can kind of help you do it. But the other thing goes back to, there's very rarely a journey of success that doesn't have a lot of ups and downs. And resilience, you know, is enormously important. And if you've got no one to talk to, so when things were going wrong, whether they're small things or big, there's no one on your executive team or your management team or however you're structured, you can go and tell about that. All you're doing is panicking them by and large, which you don't want to do. You know, your wife or partner soon gets bored of you coming home and complaining about how tough work is. So it's a source, but it's probably not a well you can go to relentlessly. And if you're down, you lose a lot of friends in the pub if it's all you can do is go tell them your woes. So, but also none of those people are actually qualified for how you deal with it, because there's one thing to chat about it, but if it's kind of getting seriously difficult, there are kind of tools and techniques. And I had a guy called Steve Ball who, you know, really helped me through it, and probably helped the business when we had difficulties, as well as being him really good at helping on managing the team and the dynamics. But far and away, giving you the kind of mental toughness and the kind of techniques to get through things like that, I think is really important, because it's pretty lonely doing what most or all of you are doing, and that's a way out of it. And there are a lot of good coaches out there. There's a lot of lousy ones. Steve was really good, but I do think it's something worth investing in for yourself. Because if you just assume it will all go well, you're probably going to fail. And I think the last thing that I touch on is important to me is kind of culture. Because I think the great thing in smaller businesses is you can define the culture. The sort of other side of it is you do define the culture. In other words, that, you know, it's great to kind of say, I want a culture like this, but if you don't live and breathe the values and the way of operating, and then get the people working for you doing it, then you won't get the culture you want. You get the culture you're creating. And again, it's very difficult to have that same impact in big businesses. But for me, I was kind of really clear from the start of breaking down things like silos and no politics, which all sounds very easy, but it's incredible, particularly if people who've come out of corporate world. They just almost can't help being a little bit, functionally biased and scoring points off each other. And I just really wanted the business all around, this is what we're trying to do with the business, that's all that it's about, and wouldn't kind of tolerate it. But that, it's incredible how you can, and we had a business that had an awful culture when I took it over, and we were able to transform it because it wasn't that big a number of people to impact. But being clear about that, I think, is really important, because if you're not, it'll just be whatever people perceive your way of behaving, and you might accidentally be creating a culture and behaviours that you didn't realise, which goes back down to a little bit like sometimes having a coach might be a good way for you to drive some of your bad behaviours again when you're under pressure into somebody else rather than into the business and things like that. I think are really important. You want to get the best out of the team and win. So, other than me tell you about how bad a guitarist I am and songwriter and so on, that's at least probably the most important things out of 10 years at Quorn, probably the first 5 years where.
And it'd be interesting to hear a bit more as well about the recent partnerships Quorn have had and why that's so important and where you look to take that.
Greg's, yeah.
I'm a big fan.
Greg's is.
Taking me to Greg's.
Exactly, me too.
Yeah. I tell you, I should have bought shares in Greg's before we did it. Really, I didn't quite. Must admit, neither of us or Greg's thought it was quite that successful. Yeah. Well, it was. I suppose it comes into a kind of a topic around branding, which I can talk about. But one of the big things, and very pertinent to brands that are not, if you're Coca-Cola and it's everywhere, then it's great. But most brands aren't everywhere. The two things that really make a brand successful, assuming the product works, is physical and mental availability. So when somebody's thinking of buying it, are you top of mind? Because there's very few brands that have got very, very material product superiority left in the world. Or that but if you or somebody's going to buy that relevant product are top of mind, you're more likely to get bought. B, if you're available and easy to find, then you're more likely to get bought. So people can be sitting in a Tesco's or wandering around here looking to, if your product's not easy to get, most people don't spend masses of time trying to buy anything in life, with some rare exceptions. And so physical availability is really important. And actually partnerships, for us, if you take our business in retail, we now have a really big, lovely block of orange in the chilled aisle. You buy a category, you find a lovely big block of orange in the frozen aisle. And that's kind of quite deliberate to have picked out a colour that means that people can wander and very quickly find our product. That I think the pack, when we started, had about 7 different colours. There wasn't a colour, I don't think, left in the rainbow that somebody hadn't put onto the pack. And we stripped it down basically to the dominant colour being orange, and that you'll find it if every TV ad is, if we can make a milk bottle orange, it'll be orange. We just suddenly put orange kind of everywhere. But the partnership thing means that suddenly, even in supermarkets, we did a deal with Dr. Oetker, so you can go to the pizza aisle, which is a really high traffic aisle, and we make a bit of money out of that. But what's most important is more people are seeing our brand and then eating the brand and having a good experience of it. The Greggs are making shed loads of money. That's kind of brilliant. But actually, we did Greggs as much for transforming the attitude and the availability as for the revenue that's generated, because we weren't anticipating it to be that successful. And we were going into KFC. We did a phenomenally successful trial with them. We're going into it's not Pucker, but one of the big pie brands that I can remember. So we're basically going to go, where is there in a supermarket? It's just not practical for us to do it, or a high street. And if we have to partner with someone to get the Quorn bit into a meal, it's good revenue business, but it's kind of good marketing and branding as well to get the product out there and available. So But yeah, but you've got to make sure you partner with kind of the right brands, because your brand's then at the mercy of the kind of person you've kind of partnered with. And if you take, because you could then kind of say Greg seems strange, but actually if you looked at Greg's, they'd actually transformed themselves already quite a lot from a sort of truck driver's pie stop to actually having quite a decent range of healthier products and even vegetarian products. But ours was kind of quite a big transformational shift for it. So there's more to come, because they're kind of like.
To give you a personal story of how that works, and my wife's vegetarian, freezer is full of Quorn stuff, and I've never tried it. I always have the meat version. My wife, I know. And it was only because Quorn came out with the Greg sausage roll. Everyone was talking about it, so when Mel, my wife, got one, I was like, sure, I'll have a bite. Well, actually, it's quite nice. So now I eat the Quorn stuff at home as well. So
Yeah.
interested to see how that works. Does anyone else have any questions or anything they'd like to ask? It's a very polite room. Feel free to shout out.
Yeah, sure. I have two questions to start with. The first is around transparency versus keeping the positivity. So we want to be really transparent with employees about where we are and what are the issues and all of that. But at the same time, as you said, if you're really, really transparent, then it might scare people. So how do you balance the kind of transparency versus keeping the positivity? Do you say like, this is what's happening, but I'm sure this will get better and all of that? And then the second question is, how do you choose the best coach? So what are the kind of criteria that you would look for and so on?
Yeah, good question. First one's actually easier, because I think it's that, isn't it? It's the glass half full, glass half empty. I think you're right. If a business is, in serious trouble and you're kind of going, hey, life's good, people kind of, you're sort of going to get a credibility gap. And sometimes actually you need to acknowledge the problem to get people to just lift their game a bit. And, so when we had trouble in 2012, actually I used Steve, the personal coach, to actually work with the team and kind of say, actually, we need to build resilience. But actually, we're going to have to up our game. What this is telling us is, okay, we had a fallout with Tesco, but the bigger learning is this is going to be a bit tougher journey than we kind of thought. So our first 18 months were just fantastic. So we kind of probably all kind of go, this will be all right. And then it was a bit of a wake-up call. So I think the transparency, as you describe it, is absolutely right. It's just, you've got to come across as really confident it's solvable, because even sort of, if we take the whole of the 10 years, even since afterwards, you still keep getting those bumps in the road. I think as long as people can see it's a solvable problem. But if you look like kind of the wheels on your shoulders and this thing is on the verge of going, then that's what creates the problems. Saying this has happened, we're going to have to dig ourselves out, we need to do more of this and reinvigorate the business is.
So kind of say this is a problem, but this is how you guys can help in solving it.
Yeah, but importantly, come across as though you believe it's solvable. Mm-hmm. That's more important, the most important bit, because people are going, great, we've got a problem, we're going to get out of it, so what do we need to do? And people then are energized and want to help and sort you. If you just panic people, then nobody behaves well panicking, I found. And,
I'll go on employees firing or investing more time in coaching. So let's say if the employee, like you previously mentioned, that he's working really hard, he's staying late, he's the first one in, he's really trying, he's studying outside as well, outside of working hours. So he's really on it. But if you don't feel that his skills are maybe not suited, for example, he's not that good.
Yeah.
Even though he's working his butt off. I'm sorry for my French.
Yeah.
But where do you draw the line in the sand, or you would invest more time in coaching? Maybe it's the manager's fault, right? Maybe he did it wrong.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's a good question, and I mean there's a lot of judgment in it. in that, particularly in your example, and certainly one of the lads I had to fire would have met a lot of that criteria. He was trying hard, his heart was in the right place. If they can get there on the time frame that you've got available, then we support them. And I probably actually, even with him, went probably longer than was good for the business. But if it's going to materially damage the business to wait for them to kind of get there, unfortunately, your job is to kind of run the business, not to employ people. So I think you've got to be fair, but ultimately there's a point where you haven't got the time. And certainly if you've had a career and you've been in corporate life, generally that corporate life you've just got a bit more time usually, but the clock is often ticking when you're in situations like this, and because you've got to weigh up how you deal with that person versus dealing with your bank or your investor when the numbers and performance of the business isn't on track, and you can't go, well, you'll get there as so that's the balance, because most people are trying. It's particularly in the more senior businesses and ones that are critical to the business. You rarely get someone in these types of businesses that aren't trying, but sometimes people just haven't got the ability.
And just to pick your brains on, you mentioned you had to let a close friend go, which obviously can't be easy. So particularly businesses at our levels, people do have people close to them involved in the business. So one, what are the learnings from that, and how do you salvage a relationship outside the business? And two, does it alter the way you look at hiring now?
I think you've got to probably be careful if it's somebody you really are close to. You've got to think about, if it goes wrong, what's the consequences of that. In the case, it was it wasn't someone very, very close, but I would have there were a personal friend who I'd kind of worked with in the past and brought into the business, and it sort of comes back down to Eduardo's point, is if I've kind of felt I've done everything fairly, then the relationship just has to live or die by if that individual can't cope with that. There's not a lot you can kind of do about it. If you've been nasty to them, you've got to accept the kind of consequences that you shat upon them, even if it's good for the business. You may struggle with the relationship afterwards. That's the decision you've got to make. And you've got to be aware of that, I think, if you bring in someone like that into the business. But if you feel you're giving kind of someone time and they're just struggling to kind of do the job, usually they know it. They don't want to know it, as in acknowledge it. But people that are struggling, particularly in these environments where I think you're very exposed, there just isn't enough around you. They can sense that the rest of the team can see their performance. And actually that's one of the difficulties of it, because certainly what I've seen is it then spirals. The moment people's kind of confidence is gone, they just perform even worse than their capability, and their best game is not good enough. And see, that's where you have to go. We've got to deal with this, because the rest of the team are sitting there. And if you don't deal with it, then you've got to look at the team. They're going to go, he's supposed to, I can't tell him to fire him, but we're all working our socks off. This guy's trying, but he's failing, and he's not doing anything. And then you kind of get, the consequences get much worse, I think, if you let it go too long. That's the nature of these environments. You're going to face those situations, whether they're friends or people who become friends through the journey. It's not employee 4 usually that you're firing. It's not some nondescript person that you don't know. If you find someone, it's probably someone that you've spent quite a lot of time with in these environments, that whether you call them a friend or not, it's kind of personal, not just a mechanical exercise. That's why I get a coach, because you probably want to talk to someone about that before or afterwards, just from a personal point of view, because not that many people that actually can do that and go, let's go out, that was done. It's an emotional thing to do if it's someone's trying, someone that's been in the business a while, well, it's not nice.
It does show you though that we can get it wrong as employees. You worked with that guy previously.
Yeah.
You thought he could do the job. It does show that when you're employing people, even though you might have a history, we can get it wrong. We're all human.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I found that some people that we've employed, I thought this guy or this person, I should say, is going to be absolutely red hot, and it's not quite worked out for whatever reason, and then we brought somebody else into the business and thought, you know what, not quite sure, but we're going to give this person a go, and they've really worked out. So you sometimes you just don't know, do you? You can get it wrong.
Yeah.
And we're all human, and I think ultimately you have to learn from it as well, and also be prepared to be surprised. Sometimes.
Both ways, I think you're right. Yeah.
One of the best hiring decisions I think we made, I decided to bring my coach or mentor at the time to the panel, and obviously for the months before they knew what was missing from the business, and we had those discussions, and then when you're hiring and you've got 10 or 6 candidates around the room, you can really lean on them for, okay, what's your view based on the situation, and we made a great call that time. And so I wasn't afraid to sort of bring them in and say, I need help hiring, because God, if we get this wrong, we're going to be drinking so much more wine every Thursday, because this is really hard. So that was helpful as well.
I've got just to sort of go off subject a little bit, but it is connected actually. You talked about culture, and you didn't mention that massively overused word purpose. Brand purpose, company purpose. Do you have a purpose? You talk about having a purpose at Quorn, and how important, if at all, in shaping the culture?
There's sort of two answers to that. So during the private equity journey, really the purpose was more transformation rather than what the purposefulness of the product and the business, being honest, and that did kind of galvanise a business that was kind of in 2010 it wasn't growing. Nobody saw this as being even a trend. I had employees who were just kind of, I was kind of going, we're going to make this $1 billion business. It's an amazing thing. And you can see people like glazing over going, hasn't grown for 3 years. What's this guy talking about? And you just had to keep saying it. And so sort of the purposefulness was in building a belief that this was an exciting business with lots of potential, that had great kind of health benefits. And I think that worked for that journey. Now we focus far more on the kind of core purpose of which is, we make people and the planet healthier, but quite markedly. And that's really powerful. But actually, it's really powerful for younger employees. So in terms of recruitment and retaining people, the sort of younger end, and so under 30, maybe even under 35 versus kind of people in the 50s. The purpose thing is kind of really motivating. Often why they came to the business, kind of. So those purposes, I think, are really powerful. But the balances, they have to be genuine. Your business sounds like one with kind of great genuine purpose. I mean, we're really fortunate that one of the things I had to do, people say, we're not going to do a CSR program, because we are a CSR program. People do CSR because they feel bad about something in their business. They're polluting the area, or they're putting sugar in their products, and it's your way of kind of giving back. But what we need to do is get people to eat as much as this, because they're going to be healthier and materially healthier, not kind of marginally. And the planet is going to be materially better off. And it took a while for people to get that, because they kind of always thought purpose was all about we need to give something back rather than
and you're right,
what
actually,
we do.
It is about authenticity, isn't it? I mean, your business or you are genuinely making the world a better place, right? Either through fair redistribution, But I think far too often brands have to feel they have to have a more altruistic purpose, and they make it up, and it becomes disingenuous.
Yeah, I
and it sort of
detest kind of those. In fact, I was talking to we've got a guy who came from Mondelez Craft. And he was saying, they were encouraged for once a month to go and help in a school or something like this. And we'd actually been talking about, the conversation started about talking about relocating head offices out of the UK to Ireland, basically to pay loads less tax in the UK. And Kellogg's did this, and I couldn't really do anything about it. But they, took £30 million worth of UK tax and stopped paying it purely by playing around with where their company was based and where the IP was. And I go, well, this is my home country, and there's less tax coming in because my company are just playing a tax game. They're not really doing any. The company looked the same the next day. And he was saying, Mondelez did it. And he said, it was really difficult because there they were going, you need to give back to society, as they kind of, shoved 100 million quid in, because they didn't pay in Ireland, you don't pay the tax in Ireland, didn't pay the UK. So they're just trouncing 100 million quid through a tax loophole, but they want you to go and help kids in a school to feel, so Mondelez can look like a better company. That to me is kind of, unauthentic, actually can really rile employees. Because I think your purpose can be just what you do is a really good thing for the people that buy it versus our job is just to make money, So what you're describing your kind of car business to me sounded really fascinating. And I could get excited about working for you rather than about worrying about whether you're going to make more money or not, because it sounds like a good thing to be doing for the people that want that sort of product. So getting the business excited about what it does as its purpose. Your previous bread business sounded kind of really good. Get people excited about that versus getting excited about the P&L. I think gets a lot more out of your people. And it makes it more fun and enjoyable. If you happen to be in businesses where there actually is a general social purpose, it's really powerful. But pretending you are, I think, is.
I agree. And in a way, your purpose is, quote me if I'm wrong, probably similar to Quorn, because I'm sure at Eve, one of your purposes was to help people sleep better.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah.
So if that's your purpose, that's a health
Well,
benefit.
One
of the health benefits. There's nothing worse than sleep deprivation.
You're spot on. And actually, why I asked the question was we really struggled hiring people at the beginning. No one had heard of us. I still talk in the present tense. Eve is still around. I'm not there. Eve is a relatively young business. It's less than 5 years old. It's maybe a public company, but it's a young business. At the beginning, it was very hard finding great people, and we flipped what we were about. We didn't, we realised we are actually properly helping people. We are helping people sleep better, and it's that flip of we're giving people. We called it we sort of wrapped it up as the perfect start. So we were selling perfect starts rather than flogging mattresses, and it's that flip we made. That suddenly, when we had a potential employee in an interview situation. Would you rather be flogging mattresses or would you rather be giving people perfect start? And that's the flip we made, which suddenly is like, I want to work for a perfect start company. Yeah, we are actually doing something over and above just flogging blocks of foam. So I think it's important to attract great people, how you position yourself to them and market as the consumer. For sure.
On the purpose piece, you talk about health a lot more than sustainability. And the newer kind of alternative meats like Beyond and Impossible, they almost do the flip reverse. Is there a reason for that?
They're not healthy.
Yeah. Tasty though.
Yeah, but they can't talk about health because Beyond Meats, they kind of say, be warned, it's the same calories, fat and everything as eating beef. So they talk about the climate, which is going to be their undoing. I don't think they've got too many people buying that product thinking it's healthy because they're living off the halo of the category. We talk about health, but you're going to see that change, not because of what Beyond Meat have done. Sort of in the last 10 years, the biggest thing that's driven the category has been kind of people's concern about health. The thing that's going to drive it in the next 10 or 15 years is concern about the climate. But I've been working on the kind of climate side of it for 8 of the 10 years. And when we did all our analysis of the Carbon Trust, because we're like, those you don't know, we're like 90% plus lower in carbon emissions, water usage, land usage, etc. Because we ferment, so there's no kind of fields, there's no animals, and cows and sheep particularly are massive greenhouse gas generators through methane. But those facts, so there's something called, those facts have been around actually for 20 plus years. Even the UN wrote a report called the Long Shadow of Livestock, which stated all of the scale of it over 10 years ago. But absolutely nobody knew about it. Nobody was talking about it. So when we did all our analysis and started to talk to people, we were talking to kind of Greenpeace, Friends of the Earth, Compassion in World Farming, and so you just end up talking to each other and agreeing that there's a massive problem. And then, but in the last 5 years, it's literally accelerated through a a series of things, as I was saying to Rachel and some of them. Netflix had a massive impact. They put programs like Cowspiracy on, which basically was telling that story brilliantly. And then they put they realised it was popular, made lots of other, What the Health and all stuff. That had a whole generation who grew up watching Netflix, watching this stuff. And it's global, so it's not like it's on BBC and it's in the UK. It's kind of everywhere. There's an investor organisation called FAIR now, which has about 3 trillion worth of our pensions managed in it, that basically are saying, if you are invested in meat, then long term it's going to be bad returns, because basically there's externalities of health and environment, and the industry isn't paying for it, and it'll have to pay for it. The world's waking up, and so in the long run there's a consequence. And they've driven lots of companies to change behaviour, from McDonald's to Tyson Foods, and they write a lot of reports that get a lot of news coverage. Then you've got people like the IPCC just coming out and saying biggest single thing an individual can do actually is not their car, it's what they eat. Yeah. And now it's in the paper all the time, and I always relate things to when I go to the pub. So when I went to the pub and took this job 10 years ago, people went, "What are you doing? What is that stuff?" And then they sort of went, "Oh yeah, kind of, there's this, it's healthy, but I don't eat that sort of stuff, thank you." And now they come back, "Do you know cows? Guys, they're really bad for the planet." I go, "Hang on, you're stealing my lines now." And it's kind of like, the taxi drivers will tell you, and that's in 5 years from literally, I couldn't find anybody who'd listen to the topic. And so you project that forward, the climate is what is going to drive a massive change in meat consumption, and therefore in our category, and in lab meats and all sorts of things.
How much research have Quorn done into the absorption of amino acids and things like that? Selfishly, it's something that I'm looking at on the pet food side, and believe it or not, our top selling products are vegan treats, but on the food side we include meat because they need their amino acids.
Yeah, for the protein. So essentially the protein building bit, the bits that are good out of the protein, essentially the amino acids that help your muscle build muscle and so on. There's 2 very quick answers, and then if you want to separately, I could talk for a long time, or get a scientist that knows what he's talking about to talk to you about it. But you can actually, there's a measurement of quality of protein, which is basically the absorption of amino acids. And Quorn basically is the same as chicken in terms of quality. Meat, pretty much we're the same as meat, because there's not much, it's 99.996, so there's not much left at the top of it. But not all proteins are the same. So a good example, if you're a vegetarian or vegan, is lentils are high in protein, but you don't really get much, your body doesn't absorb much of the good stuff. Yeah. So they're not really that helpful to you from a protein point of view.
So Quorn is complete.
So complete. But we've also just done a study with Exeter University, because as this industry grows, people are going to go, well, it's not meat, that's great, but actually what's in it, and is it any good? So we're building all the evidence.
I can see a pet food collaboration on
So
it's something I'm really keen on.
Yeah. So Exeter University, and this is a published paper now, did a study that demonstrated that Quorn's actually better than animal protein, dairy protein, building muscle, which we didn't even expect.
We just finished a life cycle assessment on pet food with our University of Bath, and the biggest impact, everyone's talking about packaging, but it's such a small impact, and the meat is the biggest thing. So it's
in climate, in environment, yeah. No, the meat's going to dwarf a bit of plastic any day.
Do you eat meat?
Occasionally. Whenever we're a vegetarian company, in fact, I have to work quite hard to get people to stop eating steaks when we go out for business meetings. But it was never built as a vegetarian company. But I wasn't a massive meat eater when I joined, and the longer I've been there, I just find now, if it was the only food, if somebody served it as the only food available, I won't say no. But if I can choose, I never choose it. But I can't pretend that I'm vegetarian, therefore if someone put it in front of me, I go, don't serve it to me. And I'd love to get out. I don't eat much dairy, but unfortunately I've read all about the dairy as well. And that, I know, it's just really hard. I actually don't miss meat. Yeah, I don't miss. I'm really quite happy not eating meat. I find dairy harder. even though all I actually have is a bit on some cereal and a bit on a cup of tea.
Yeah. Cereal, great
I'm
way
terrible.
to start the day.
Alpro's cashew milk, that's a good one for tea.
I wanted to ask about the international kind of development of Quorn, and is that so with you partnering with KFC, which is really exciting? Is that kind of a big part of how you're going to? I mean, just interested in terms of, because obviously you've got a big presence in the UK, and I just wondered what was going to happen internationally and
Yeah, we've been. We're about 75% in the UK, 25%, obviously something like that, maybe 70% now. The US now, our biggest market. We're selling about the mid of Europe, generally Nordics, Benelux, and Australia and bits. And funny enough, generally the quick, whether it's the Starbucks, KFC, Burger King, all of those. One of the good things is they're kind of well, they're not quite. Most of them aren't actually global, but they cover large parts of the world. And think most of them would use your UK to run, say, all of Europe. So you almost basically got a US hub for US. There's usually an entity. UK runs Europe, and Singapore runs Asia. And that's kind of the world, kind of largely covered. So they're great to be able to build the brand, kind of globally and get exposure to it. We're talking to quite a few of them in quite a lot of geographies. Generally, international is much tougher. I think. I mean, I've made mistakes with kind of hiring, but I also think it's a lot harder than people kind of think. Even Europe, and I'm not going to talk about Brexit, but the concept that there's a kind of free market in Europe currently is kind of so laughable. It's unbelievable. I mean, the French come up with a regulation by the week that makes it more difficult to sell your products. A product that you could sell in the UK or in Germany into France, whether it's a packaging regulation or a nutritional claim regulation or a retailer-based regulation. Germany, the trade is enormously biased towards local German companies. In Italy, you have to set up an entity and a bank that won't trade with you unless you exist in Italy. All these things are actually contrary to what the EU says, but and in a lot of cases, certainly, I mean, obviously our primary business is through retail. You forget how sophisticated UK retailing is. I mean, America, it's kind of really backward, and there's hundreds of them. So in America, to get our product. One product, say, in the same distribution as we have in the UK is 100 and something retailers. And probably worse because you've got some of them that are technically one retailer, but they've got 17 divisions like Safeway, and you have to deal with each division. You can't do a centre. So in intensity, Italy is about 200 buying decisions to get to what is 4 decisions in the UK. And in the UK, if Tesco's say you're in 800 stores, in 4 weeks you're in 800 stores. In Italy, if they say that, it's a concept that may or may not occur. Even in Germany, where you think it's really efficient, outside of Aldi and Lidl, who are efficient, the rest of them, what you think you've got as distribution, what occurs in a store is you're miles apart. So it's if I was doing it again, I would have narrowed down the geographies and just really focused, just because it's just much harder. So we focus really heavily on the US now, and it's going really well. But we should have focused that hard from the beginning.
That I totally agree. I mean, that's exactly the Eve story. International expansion nearly killed us. We're in 15 territories, 15 countries. And Kevin's absolutely right. It's so difficult. On the face of it, it's so easy. Get the website translated. Work with a local sort of guy on the ground to internationalise. In reality, so difficult, Just the cultural differences as well. Yeah. Massive. And if I had my time again at Eve, and currently Eve's operating in Ireland, UK and France. We've managed to crack France. But again, if I had my time again, I would concentrate on the UK and maybe try and do the US properly. That's it.
It can be vanity, can't it? Internationalisation can be vanity.
Well, it's a good story, isn't it?
Yeah.
Spin it to investors. We're an international company.
It can take a lot of resource, it can take a lot of recaps, and there's a big enough job. Even now for Quorn, there's a big enough job to do in the UK, isn't there? Everybody's heard of it, but not everybody's eating it. The stories of I don't eat that rubbish. There's a lot of convincing to
about 35% of population.
And I think, as a digital garage, we've currently got, just over 2 million car owners. So we've got about 3%, 4%, about 3% of the UK car park. It's not a bad story, and it's not a bad size, but there's 35 million cars in the UK to go at, car owners. So, focusing on internationalisation for us would be vanity, a load of resource and a load of cash, and could end your business if you're not careful.
You think Tesco went into the US and lost phenomenal. It's not just small companies that find it difficult. But to your point, I kind of track businesses and that have started to do well here that are a bit like the size of us, and then you kind of hear that they've raised some money and they're going into the US. There's a food called Strong Roots. It's an Irish business. And they failed in the UK, and he's just been claiming they've raised 15, 20 million to go into the US, and I'm just kind of going, pour it down the drain now. I mean, if you think it's just that easy, and they all get a listing in Whole Foods or something, and you get a listing, and you go, hey, America's easy, and then you suddenly, the FDA stop your container on the water as they love to do, and the next thing you're not supplying it's always massively harder. And
so one other thing I'd love to pick your brains on as well, I think we all struggle with time management. We was talking about that before. Going on. Not just within our business, but how do you manage family life and keep that going? And so it sounds like you've obviously got a good social life with music and going down to the pub and whatever else. How do you manage all that?
Yeah, I don't go to the pub that often. Enjoying I think it has to be. It does have to become a bit of your hobby as well as your job. Compared to if I compare it to corporate life, whereas I could kind of once I got home, corporate life was over. Really, you're always potentially you're always available because of the business, but actually you don't really ever stop thinking about it because it's kind of if you get that passionate about something, it's very difficult to say I'll stop now at 7 o'clock and. Some people may be brilliant at that, but I think it's pretty difficult. So you have to accept that, I didn't play a huge amount of music during that time, and I didn't go to the pub as much as I'd like to. And then but what you do have to do is manage that. Almost the other way around is, am I spending enough time on my kind of family life, and almost planning backwards from that rather than. Do the job and then hope that happens, because I think that's the bit that can.
Now how do you do it then? Do you try balance it all in one go, or do you over-index on work when that needs attention and family?
Yeah, and what I would do is just things like, so if I'm away, I'd kind of go, I'm away, I'll work, because then if it's a Friday and I could take the kids to school when they were that age and not worry about it, because I didn't, my job, and like yours, all of yours, wasn't 8:30 to 6 or whatever. My job was run the business. I could run the business at midnight if I wanted to. I could run it at 5 a.m, so I wouldn't feel bad about going, well, I'm going to take the kids to school, pick them up. I'm going to do things that actually, but at Kellogg's I couldn't do. But I might be working on a Tuesday night when I'm away till 9 o'clock at night. Well, rather than watch a movie. And so it's about seeing. Not a conventional structure to the work, but kind of going, I'm going to make sure I do some kind of family things and focus around that, but in a more unconventional way, and that worked. Yeah, I was very conscious that you can pay the price because you do get quite absorbed into these things, I think, and you can forget other stuff. So it's a very good question, because
Just to add on that question, it's one thing when you're like the leader of the business. How do you think about kind of bringing that on into employees? Because the way we've kind of thought is, okay, well, if we're doing it, kind of our employees should all feel like, if and you want to come in at 11 and stay until 11, come in at 11 and stay until 11 rather than you have to be here at this time and come out at this time. But to what extent you can bring that on to employees, and is there a point where you scale so much that you actually need to bring back this structure and say, well, actually now it should be more 9 to 5?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, because I think it's very. If you talk about you and a kind of small leadership team really vested in makes them successful, I think you have to kind of have trust and kind of go, you got the job to get done. How you get it done within reasonable. We need to be able to connect enough. You can't not turn up at the office, but if you want to do something family related and it's a funny time, just get on and do it. And if you've got, we've got 800 employees, even if I ignore a large number of those that are in a structured factory environment, got a couple hundred people. I think that this flexibility of work is a real challenge, because you get people who are really hard and you kind of want even that flexibility. You get people who just take the piss out of these things and kind of go, great, I work from home on a Friday. Well, you don't need to, and you don't work that hard when you're in the office, and then you get. I think it's a lot of companies. I think that's a real challenge, because the expectations of flexibility are great now, but it's great for the people that are really motivated. It's a real nightmare when you can't feel and touch the people. You just need to make sure you're just getting it done. And there's more of those people. The bigger an organisation gets, the more you've got of people that you kind of go, I need to actually make sure that they're doing their job. And you can't say, well, that person can have all the flexibility, and you can't. So I think it's easier in a small setup, whereas I think you just kind of have to have a degree of trust and just people on they're getting the stuff done. And worry about it when you're big and successful, how you deal with the other side of it.
Kevin, do you mind if I take you back to 2010? Quite interesting.
Yeah.
So obviously the business then, as you said, wasn't perhaps doing so good. The culture wasn't so great. Exponent's the PE house, I think. So Exponent came in. Obviously saw something in the business. I think there's probably 3 or 4 questions I'm almost going to ask in one question.
Yeah, go on.
Which is, what was that transition like? Why Exponent? What did they see, and what differences did they make? Because obviously taking the business, I think, in 5 years to a 550 million buyout, I think it was.
Yeah.
If research serves me right. What were they like, and why them, and how much input did they have?
I understand why it's sort of 3 questions in one. I mean, I'll try and answer it, because I think I can, which is, first of all, I hadn't got an intent to be in PE. I just kind of, like the Quorn business, Premier was selling it. It looked like actually Nestle were going to buy it. So there could have been a whole different kind of story to this. Exponent got into the process. By that time, I'd realised that this business was appallingly run and brilliant, and so I had an idea of what to do with it. So from their point of view, they had been tracking it as an interesting business, and then by the time I got to meet them, I kind of had a story to tell. Look, this is what I think of this, and I had the experience from Kellogg's to kind of go, Special K's got a health business benefit that's that big compared to cornflakes, and I did a pretty good job of making it look like it's really big. This thing's got this massive benefit that most people don't even know about. So this is kind of like, hence I went, it's $1 billion idea, this thing. It's what kind of almost the first thing I said, because Special K was $1 billion, and I went, well, $1 billion with no benefit. It wasn't an overly scientific process of getting to the billion, I can assure you. But so I think it goes back to, I think I had a kind of a story and some experience to bring to bear on it. I was actually very wary of PE. I thought their reputation was kind of, high risk, higher fire, rip costs out of business. And there are PE firms that are like that. But it's a very broad, it's a bit like there's different corporate organisations. I like them because they're kind of quite small. They really showed interest in me and the business plan, not just the numbers. And they lived up to that. So they were not, I mean, they were willing to invest in the business. They were interested in the business, not just showing the spreadsheets. And there are particularly American PE firms where all they want to do is just see numbers, and if you miss a number, who do I hit? I mean, yeah, in simple terms. And so we got, in fact, I hope to do more work with them, because I think they're one of the better firms, and there's lots. I saw a lot because lots of them wanted to buy us at various points, and there's loads of them going, I wouldn't sell it to them. I'm not going near them, and there are others that are good. I think one of the, it becomes an opportunity for your businesses. The right PE firms and the PE model actually is really good, in that really all that matters is the start and the end, and actually in between doesn't matter. So the quarterly results, they matter as an indication of progress, but they're not something you report into the city. I mean, companies like Kellogg's now, almost the business is run on quarter-to-quarter results performance. That's almost what drives 90% of the decision-making, big decisions in those businesses. And they make a lot of bad decisions because of that, and they miss out on investment opportunities often because they just kind of go, well, we're P&L constrained and the shareholders, and what's going to sell well in the shareholders? You've got up to 5 years with and you kind of go, right, we start here. We have to do a big restructure and take a hit, as long as bank covenants are all kind of okay, then you've got enormous flexibility as long as they're the PE firm and you are aligned to what you're doing. If you start performing badly, you're not going to be there for an awful lot of time. If it's your performance, the business is performing badly, but it's kind of the market conditions or whatever. A good PE firm will back the management. Bad ones might not, but a good one will. And Exponent, I've seen many of their businesses where they back people for a long time because they can accept that the category's just tanked, or like our case, you fall out with a big customer and it's the right thing for the. We fell out with Tesco's together because we both said if we wanted to put our prices up, Tesco said no. They said if we back down, then they know they can do that forever. That our prices they can control, and if they didn't put it up, then the price increase collapses. So that was a good example. I think Kellogg's would have potentially backed down, going, we need the number. God, we can't have a bad year. Whereas we went, we're going to have a bad year. The problem was the recovery just started taking a bit too long, and that's when that was actually for me the panic bit. The Tesco decision was a mutual decision with the owners to fall out. So I think that there's a real mixture of them out there. I think you can read them. I think it seemed to me that some have a reputation, but some of them, you don't have to be in a room with some of these guys very long to kind of go, I'm not spending 5 years of my life with you involved in my life. And others can go, I think you get it. And they let you talk to other CEOs. That usually gives an indication that they're kind of amicable.
Of their portfolio.
Yeah, their portfolio and ex-portfolio and so on. So,
cool. We have time for probably just one more question, I would have thought. If anyone's got any others?
Can I ask you that Tesco question? So that was about the price.
Yeah, we were trying to put a price increase through.
And presumably you fell out with them, but then ultimately they accepted. They wanted to have your product in store.
Yeah. I mean, the one advantage, the reason why we fell out confident with them is we knew through our data that there's enormous loyalty to our product, in the sense that people will go to, if the range is lousy, they'll go to the retailer with a better range, particularly that core user of vegetarians, where it's actually quite an important part of their kind of diet, versus a flexitarian or a meat reducer or whatever. They're not going to do that, but those core big shopping baskets. And we were able to demonstrate also that shopping basket was higher than average, and the whole shopping basket moves, not just the Quorn sale. So we showed Tesco that they probably lost 170 million quid in 6 months just by what they were doing. And we knew that data when we were going into it. They still took about a third of our range out. We sat there and went, it's just wait. Their performance of the category will go. They'll lose money, and you then start going up the chain to kind of go, well, we've got this data, and you wouldn't want your boss to kind of know that you've just made 170 million quid cock up. The difficulty with price increases is, so you take something like the butter industry where, there's 3 or 4 brands of butter, and as long as there's 3 of them on the shelf, consumers aren't going to walk. That's when price is difficult, because they will just go, I'll potentially take you out. So it depends on the power you've got, but it does also depend on your willingness to sit it out. And if you're really desperate to...
Perfect. I feel like we have all taken so much away from that. I think we covered a lot of ground in a fairly short amount of time there. So, quick round of applause for Gary.
Oh, thank you. Good fun.
And thank you everyone again for coming out this morning. So next up in the programme, we've actually got our brand storytelling masterclass on the 26th. With a lady called Caroline Rowland. So those that are not familiar with Caroline, she is responsible for the successful bid for the 2012 Olympics, but now works very closely with struggling sports leagues. So she works with the PGA and the Surf League to help tell their stories in a compelling way. So look out for that invitation, and we will see you very, very soon.
Thank you, James.
Great, thanks, James.
Great.